Teacher and student bonds. And I'm going to say, you know, those top three, I mean, that is so mission driven right there. And because you have those, then you also have a very strong reputation among the community who knows you. You have good parent engagement. You provide excellent support for families and children. And then your academics are also a strength. Now, the weaknesses, I would say, you know, if the strengths are the things you're really proud of, the weaknesses are the things that you think you can do better at. And it is not at all uncommon to see the same thing in strengths and weaknesses. That happens a lot. But the weaknesses that kind of emerged from everything is lack of a clear vision for the future, the active support of the board, awareness of San Miguel. So it was, in essence, it was the people who know us think we're awesome. There are just so few of people who know who we are, that's something that needs to be worked on. Student performance after leaving San Miguel, adequate resources and facilities, and I'll tell you that's on every single SWOT analysis for a nonprofit that I've ever done, and then community involvement in your mission. So opportunities would be those things that you want to make sure you take advantage of. They might be within your control, or they might be outside your control, but opportunities include partnerships with other community organizations, which I think would be brilliant. And I know you have a few of those, but let's maybe look at expanding those. Partnerships with other educational organizations, whether that's all the way from elementary, maybe that's high school, maybe that's post-high school. And then providing college and career services. Threats are the things that are happening to you that you really need to be aware of. Changes in immigration laws is one area. And as we know, with a new administration coming in, there are going to be changes again, because all of those things seem to be always in flux. The changing habits of donors. And I know that at other board meetings, that's something that you guys have talked about in terms of there's lots of shifts, and Caroline can talk about this as well. There are a lot of shifts in the way that people are giving. Donor advised funds are by far the largest growth area in terms of how people are giving. And the problem with that is it makes it kind of hard to build those personal relationships. It's hard to just write a grant for that. So the whole landscape is changing in terms of how people are giving to charity. Lack of awareness of San Miguel, that's a weakness as well as a threat. Lack of relationships in the community. And virtual learning, and I just kind of threw virtual learning in that one big bucket that includes everything related to COVID. So that's, you know, kids not being able to come to school, maybe kids struggling to get the technology that they need, keeping them on track, really all of those things. And obviously that's a perfect example of something out of your control, but that truly impacts you. And then I know this has been discussed a lot in meetings, the reliance on Dancing with the Stars, and really looking, honestly, I think it's an opportunity to expand the foundation of a lot of your funding resources. So that's another threat to look at. So as you looked at the report and the SWOT analysis and the interviews and all of the surveys and everything else, does anybody have anything that really jumped out to them that was impactful or that they had a question about?
On the weaknesses, maybe I'm misinterpreting the top box there, but board members' active support of the organization and mission. Are they talking about financial support, or what is it? I mean, I thought we had a pretty supportive board, but that's just my own observation.
I heard comments kind of all over the place, and as you look in the individual responses, I think a lot of it might be ensuring 100% that there's and I'm thinking back to one comment that someone made is it's kind of that whole old 80-20 rule of 80% of the work is being done by 20% of the people, and that really needs to, on a board of directors, that really shouldn't be the balance on that, that some of the work, some of the influence, some of the board members working as fundraisers, commitment to the mission as far as donating and attending meetings. I mean, and I will point out that we only have 62% of your board here today, which is fairly low. I mean, things happen. It's not a judgment, but that just shows that that may be one of the things that you're struggling with. We actually may have more than 62%, but that's an example, and those are the examples that I heard.
Okay.
I'd just like to throw out the thought that in the top box under weaknesses, nonprofit board best practices not used, and correlate that to the mission-driven board engagement / knowledge. I would really like for us to make a commitment to be a learning board. I think when Kathleen Brules and Kurt came and addressed us, we all learned a lot. And I think it would be great if we could, maybe not every board meeting perhaps, but every other, have something that we can share with each other, an article, a video, whatever, that deals with best practices and also deals with learning about our student population. For instance, the trauma that our kids go through and how that affects them across their lifespan, and how we address some of those things. So I think a commitment to being a learning board and expanding our knowledge, because I think we all have knowledge. I don't know how current it is, but just a thought.
Excellent.
I think those opportunities then go into when you're a learning board and you're learning about some of the trauma and some of the situations that we deal with, that goes right into then being an ambassador for the school and being able to really talk potential donors, which, as we know, we're constantly chasing. But if you can't tell the story, it's kind of hard to speak with any validation. If you've got some examples of situations that we're currently facing with some of our kids, it just makes you a better, well-rounded fundraiser for the school and ambassador for the school, which then goes to all this awareness in the community. It's not all fundraising. A lot of it is also just awareness in the community.
Relationships,
All about relationships.
Yep. And I think you're right, Caroline, there's a through line there that one leads to the next, to the next, to the next. So.
Exactly. And and that's a brilliant point to make, because that's something we're going to talk about as we kind of get to a sustainability plan, is that none of it works in isolation. You've got to have it all. It's all got to be one package, and it's all got to just sort of intermesh in order for it to really be successful. What other observations did you see?
I think relationships, partnerships with the community, that's vital in the Hispanic community around us, because even though we are in the middle of a geographic area that's hugely Hispanic, and we serve the parents well and the kids well, there's still we can't find a Hispanic person to be on the board, and after 14 years, that's kind of a big deal. And just the community at large. I think when we were doing Dancing with the Stars, we did get some PR and social media reach out there, but then when we pull back from that, it's like, I haven't seen them in a year, so where are they? So I think we can do a lot better with that. Okay.
Agree. I do think it's very important that we put some emphasis on our relationship with the Hispanic community for obvious reasons, but And I think that's why it's so important that we find someone that is high profile in the Hispanic community to serve on our board. I liken this to when I was doing a little bit of work with Drexel. It was a little hard when you've got a room, we're in a North Tulsa community, and it's a room full of all Caucasian individuals there was some you know, who are you to tell us what you think we need kind of a feeling, and they've done a great job of expanding and getting a foothold in that community. I think we need the same. It's easy for us to think we know what everybody needs, but if we really don't have a representative of that community, we're making judgment calls based on our perception and possibly not reality in some cases.
I agree, and we just need the buy-in of the community we're serving, to as big a degree as we can.
I came across a really good quote not that long ago, and I wrote it down just for this, actually for lots of things that I work on, because it really impacted me, and I think it speaks to what Caroline had said. And this was from Lila Watson, who is Australian and works really hard on the Aboriginal issues there. And her quote was, "If you've come here just to help me, then you're wasting your time. If you come because your liberation is bound together with mine, then we can work together." And so I think that's, I think if all you're wanting to do is just drop blessings on people, you can absolutely do that, but I don't know how much long-term change is going to happen. If you're working with people to bring them, to help them reach their goals, then I think that's so much more powerful. And I think San Miguel actually does that. It's just recognizing that that's what you're doing rather than just raining blessings down on people.
Dana, I've got a question. With regard to, I know you mentioned that it's not unusual for strengths and weaknesses to show up, but I'm looking specifically at the mission-driven line item with regard to parent engagement.
Mhm.
Can you touch on your findings, your thoughts with regard to those showing up under both strengths and weaknesses?
Mm-hmm. I think that, now are you talking about parent engagement specifically?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I think a lot of the comments that I got were that San Miguel has excellent parental engagement in terms of parents coming for parent-teacher conferences and coming to volunteer and doing those things. I think if you were going to set a benchmark for comparison to the public schools, obviously San Miguel is here. What's the ideal though? So a lot of it really just depends on what your goal is and really how you want to measure that. So if your goal is to just have more parental engagement than the public schools around you, then hey, you're doing great. If your goal with parental engagement is even higher than that, then maybe you're not reaching that. So I think that there were some people that I talked to or who responded to the surveys who their benchmark was that, the public school level. And so obviously they thought that San Miguel was really just hitting that goal fantastically. There were others whose expectations were higher than that. And so they felt that San Miguel was maybe not reaching that. So what that tells me, when you see something like that, that tells me that there's not a lot of consensus about what you're seeking to achieve in terms of parental engagement. There's not an agreement on here's our target, here's how we're going to reach it, here's why it's important, and here's how we're going to do it. And so when you have a finding like that, that's really what that tells me, is that there's really just not a well-defined goal for that area. And or if it is well-defined, it might not be well communicated. And so that points to, that's why you can include it as both a strength and a weakness, is because if there's not a whole lot of consensus on what's going on with that, it's something that needs to be addressed.
Were there any indications of what specific things might need to happen to raise that bar?
I think a lot of the concerns were things such as the population that you're serving may not have the background. I think probably everybody sitting here right now had parents who were pretty well educated.